Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Hail Yes, a Detroit Free Press podcast about University of Michigan athletics. I'm Tony Garcia, Michigan football and basketball writer for The Free, joined as always by the fellas, Andrew Burkle, our editor and producer, and Reiner Sabin, our Big Ten insider. And Reiner is here, I've just found out, because he did not like calculus in high school. That's how he got on this path. Is that why you're sitting here today, Reiner?
No, not at all. So, no, that's not.
A little bit? Hey, I mean, it played a role.
No, I just did not like calculus. Nothing. It's totally irrelevant as far as my career path.
What if you had like calculus and you'd wanted to go be a statistician or a professor of some sort? You would not be here.
I don't think that would be the case. Just because I like this subject. I mean, I like biology. I think it would be biology.
Did you like journalism?
Journalism? Yeah. I mean, I did, but I didn't actually take any. Well, I did take a couple of broadcast classes, which clearly didn't help because.
Well, I was going to say, and now we're here. Yeah. Andrew, can you help? Andrew Burkle, can you help settle this for us?
Well, I actually have an even funnier math story. So I was like kind of ahead of. I'm not ahead of the curve, but slightly. Like if there was two levels, I was on maybe the slightly higher one. And so I was in Algebra 2 as a freshman, and I took geometry as a sophomore. And then I found a way to not take another math class the rest of my career because culinary at Saline High School counts as a math class because, you're adding cups and converting it and all that stuff. So I was able to avoid any of the tough math classes from basically sophomore year to the end of my high school career. So I definitely did not like math.
That's really fantastic. That is work in the system from a young age. Good for you. I liked math early. Like little kid, and then the harder it got, it was really easy to step away from. Maybe we've got another guy on the beat. I'm not going to name his outlet because we're competitors, but Reiner knows who I'm talking about. There's another guy on the beat, one of our friends who likes to ask a lot of wacky questions to players. Maybe we will get him to ask the players if any of them like math, so we can bring something to the table relevant about Michigan football. Quickly, if there were, because like Kalel Mullings, here's slight crossover. I mean, he's a Ross Business School graduate, right? Like I would imagine he's into numbers and can do those sorts of things. Although I think he said real estate sort of is like his secondary plan after football. Does anyone strike you as a numbers guy on the team, Reiner, before we get into this?
I don't know. I mean, I really am trying to think anybody Kalel probably would be at the top of the list. Maybe Orgy, maybe Alex. I mean, I can see him. Possibly.
I don't know his major. Well, we'll get back to everybody on that. Anyways, what we do know about is that Michigan football is top 10. They are 4-1. They are 2-0 in the Big Ten, and they just won a second consecutive game by the exact same score, 27-24. However, the vibes were quite different after. That's what I wrote about post game. One of a handful of things that was my major takeaway. Reiner was in East Lansing, where Ohio State hammered Michigan State, but he certainly watched and has been at all the press conferences since and is well abreast to what happened. Reiner, I mean, it was, like I just said, I mean, it was kind of the same old story, although this time Sharon Moore said he was happy to win, quote, not happy how it happened.
Yeah, I mean, it was not a good performance really at the end, obviously, for Michigan. I mean, Minnesota scored 21 points on them, moved the ball with relative ease while running up tempo, and then the offense obviously did them no favors. The interception thrown by Orgy on a errant pass to Colston Loveland, triggered the rally for Minnesota. And then, Minnesota easily could have maybe tied the game, maybe won it, had that onside kick gone in their favor. And that was a really controversial play that went in Michigan's favor. And then even when they tried to close out the game, you had the bad snap situation there. And it was just, it looked all bad at the end for Michigan.
Yeah, it was sort of
it looked like a top 10 team. And that's the thing we're all wrestling with, is that this team is 4-1, technically ranked in the top 10, but it does not look like a top 10 team.
Yeah, not at the end. There was certainly a stumble to the finish. However, for the second straight week, it was a very good start, right? The first 2.5 quarters, I was about writing my game story, right? About how Michigan sort of got things together. I mean, early on, it was a lot of complimentary football. You had Zeke Berry with the strip sets up. Okay, so first, Michigan marches the field, right? 9 plays, 79-yard drive. Great opening tone setter. Then after some punts back and forth, which happens as the game settles in, Michigan wins the battle of field possession. Minnesota's backed up. Zeke Berry strips the ball inside their 20. A couple plays later, it's 14-0. Then you get a blocked punt a few possessions later, 21-0. Now, it's not the offense generating things, but this is all still very good complementary football. However, as soon as that stops happening, the wheels fall off completely, right? And we were asking Kirk Campbell about that a bit today, and you made a lot of points about when, I mean, Alex Orji's pick was the turning point in the game. There's no question about it. But I mean, if you're really glass half fulling it, like Campbell was today, I mean, he said if Orji makes it through his full progression and gets to that final read, I mean, Donovan Edwards is walking in for a touchdown, and it's 31-3. However, that is the point, right? You're not working with JJ McCarthy, who would have made it all the way to that backside and floated a ball. You're working with a quarterback who's making his second start, and there is a lot that's still to be desired for Alex Orji. We'll just very quickly, the stats as a reminder: 10 of 18, 86 yards, a touchdown, and that costly, but could have been even costlier, interception.
Yeah, I mean, he's, again, a work in progress as a passer, never has been refined as a passer going back to his time in high school. He had a 52% completion rate in high school. It was the same issues, again, that you saw with Joe Milton, who also had a poor completion percentage in high school and was very inaccurate and cost them games in the 2020 COVID season. So, I mean, Orji's, I mean, this team luckily runs the ball a lot better, or is more committed to running the ball a lot better than that 2020 team. But there's a lot of similarities, I guess, in that sense that you have a quarterback, again, who is just, not very accurate, struggles to consistently execute the offense the way that you would want to. But again, because of his running ability and threat, he might be, again, the best option for this team, in the sense that if they're really committed to running the ball, which they seem to be, then they may be able to keep teams off the field, keep offenses off the field, and kind of rely on their defense, which is their strength.
Yeah, and I've got a question for you exactly to that point, Ryder. As Kirk was talking about today, there were 26 designed dropbacks, right? I think there's a sack, 7, some scrambles, all in all, what have you. He ends up passing the ball 18 times, but there were 26 designed passes, which he said, he said it was right in the honey hole or something. Yeah. Or there was kind of a funny phrase, right around the number where they target JJ in recent years, and that's true. It's certainly not far off. But doesn't it make you kind of wonder why they are? I mean, we know they need to be balanced, right? I mean, of course they have to be balanced, but I hope I'm not talking out of both sides of my mouth when I say, why are they passing it so much? And then saying, well, they need to be able to pass it. But if you can't effectively pass it, I just, do you see what I'm saying? Right? Why are there not more designed runs for Alex Orji? There were 2 designed runs. Why are there not, they should not be running they should not be running a similar system. It should be a little more tweaked.
Right. He said that there were more read options, and that, basically Alex,
there were some.
He handed it off to, Kalel on some of those. That's what he argued. But again, he's been defensive, I guess, about his performance, and kind of pinned it some on the players. I mean, he said that, the players have to execute, and that's why they're not getting to more of the, creative plays in his call sheet. And, I mentioned that, players have to, especially the receivers, have to get off, man coverage and create their own separation. But I mean, part of it's on him too. But yeah, I think he's struggling as an offensive coordinator and play caller, and trying to find the right balance. And because I think he would like to have some balance so that you can keep the defense honest, with the passing game, which I think leads to the throwing the ball as many times, with the 26 dropbacks. At the same token, again, they're not necessarily able to effectively complete a lot of those passes, which, again, is not going to have any effect on the defense. They're not going to honor the deep shot and the play action if you can't consistently complete deep shots and passes off of play action. It's just not going to change how the defense is going to play you.
And so he's in a tough spot, right? He can't say what he probably would want to say, right? If we were having a beer and a casual conversation, or him and one of his best friends, and he's like, yeah, look, I mean, JJ's not walking through that room anymore, right? I can't do the same things. Defenses aren't playing us the same way, and so it is incumbent on him to make the stylistic changes necessary to still maximize what he does have in this offense. But when he's saying things like the plays are there, we've got to make them, that's tough. And then you look at, and something I'm going to write later today, I mean, he's talking about, which is what we're saying, but I mean, it's the need for explosives in the pass game. There are no 20-plus yard pass plays for Alex Orji thus far. Michigan is last among all the Power 4 teams, right, in this stat, and 127th out of 130 teams in plays, and that's why. I mean, and that's why Kirk said it's sort of this. He didn't use this phrase, but it's a little bit of this boom bust with this offense, right? They had 3 drives. As soon as once they are getting that first down and they're moving it and they're using a little bit, it's not great, but it's good. If you could do that consistently, it would be good enough for what this defense has, right? I mean, three drives that generate team points and take up 18 minutes off the clock. That's really great work. Here's the problem. The other 9 drives that take up a combined 12 and a half minutes, an average of 1.5 minutes per drive, right? I mean, 8 of Michigan's 11 possessions this past week went 17 yards or fewer. Only 3 amassed even 40 yards. They're not moving the ball. They're not even starting. So that's a real issue.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and again, their longest pass play so far this season has been 33 yards to Marlon Klein in the Arkansas State game, and it's again, that's a problem if you can't even present the threat of a deep pass or an explosive play, and so it's going to make your offense have to work doubly hard to try to get points on the board. And I think that's his point. But it also goes back to the judgment here. Why was Kirk Campbell saying that this was going to be an explosive offense and the talent was there? Everybody was questioning the talent on the outside. And why didn't they do more to try to get more of those kind of players there? I mean, I'm tired of the excuse that, Michigan was competing for the national championship, so they couldn't recruit at all in the transfer portal. I mean, all programs have to look to the future as they're dealing with the present. And it's just, frankly, it's insulting to everybody's intelligence to suggest that.
How would a sentence like that fly in Tuscaloosa or Athens or Columbus? I mean, give me a break. I'm totally with you. It's not. And then this is the only line I'm going to steal from ahead, because we're trying to look at this past game and the things we talked about and then look forward to Washington. But Michigan, I mean, you look at all of their receivers. I mean, here are their best receivers, like from the actual receiver. Their 2 top pass catchers in terms of yards are tight ends. Colston Loveland has 228. Marlon Klein has 6 grabs for 69. Then Samaj Morgan, 12 for 62. Fred Moore, 4 for 43. Tyler Morris, 6 for 43. Kendrick Bell, 4 for 42. So their 4 leading receivers, this is quick math, have 26 receptions for 190 yards through 5 games. 190 yards for 4 leading receivers. Meanwhile, cutscene, you look over at Washington's box score. Giles Jackson, a former Michigan commit, has 34 grabs for 401 yards by himself. He has double all of Michigan's wide receiver production. And this is someone who couldn't make it in the room or transfer it out or what. I mean, just any way you slice it, it's asinine that it has gotten to this level.
Over at Michigan State, Nick Marsh has 13 catches for 262 yards and a touchdown, and he hasn't played in one game and hardly played in the game last weekend either. I mean, it's crazy. And I mean, how does a program like Michigan that just came off a national championship have such a dearth of quality wide receivers? It's incredible. And again, this is on the coaching staff. I mean, Sharon Moore and Kirk Campbell were both there, and they came out of the spring saying, "Oh, we've got explosive players. This is going to be an explosive offense." I mean, and people were like, "Wait a second, you don't really have an X type of receiver on the roster." I mean, yes, they tried to make Kendrick Bell into that, and they basically have a bunch of kind of slot level receivers. And, I wrote back in the spring that Colston Loveland was probably going to be the top target and probably lead the team in receptions. And I said it was going to be a tight end centric offense, but that was because I had no faith in the outside skill, receivers, and it's proven to be the case.
Same reason why. I mean, a lot of these things were predictable, right? Like Connell Mullings taking over this job because of the style of runner they were going to need. The quarterback controversy that like Orji could lead a style of offense, but really you wanted a passing threat. So many of these things were seen. And I can't even give them full credit, but coming out of the spring game, Ryder, if you recall, and you always do, they were very thin at wide receiver. They had like 5 scholarship guys, and they did say, they're like, look, we got to add wide depth there. Here's the problem. They quote unquote added Amarion Walker, who was in that room, then went to defense, then left to go to the Grove for a few months, and then come back. And they called that an addition. And then CJ Charleston, who was a mid-level wide receiver at Youngstown State. Neither of those guys are moving the needle. Neither of those guys Amarion Walker, once again, can't even see the field because he can't make it as a run blocker, and he's not picking up on the pass concepts. And they need him to stretch the field. They needed him. And he can't do it. And then CJ Charleston, I will say, he is maybe their best blocking wide receiver. I mean, he can get after it. So I'll give him that. But 4 grabs in 5 weeks when you need to move the ball on the outside or have the illusion of doing it is just I can't believe it got to this level. So to you then, Andrew.
But the problem also is that Evan Lake has been a turnstile on the right side. So the pass blocking is just not there consistently, which again is part of the reason why Davis Warren was throwing those interceptions. I mean, some of those pressure moments, he ended up making bad decisions off of the pressure. And I think that's why they had to move in Orji, one, because he's not going to pass the ball as much, so they can mitigate that weakness in a lot of ways. And they also can mitigate the fact that, they're probably going to limit the turnovers because they're not going to be in pressure situations from a passing standpoint, which will, obviously lead to some rash decision making too. So I think that's part of the reason. Again, they have a real weakness on that right side with Evan Lake.
And Kirk Campbell said he said, like, he was asked about Evan Lake specifically today, Wednesday. He said they need more competition behind him, frankly, which I thought Jeff Percy actually did a pretty good job filling in for Miles Hinton on the left side. So I'm surprised that that's not translating to the right side. And the other guy is Andrew Gentry, who's graduated high school 5 years ago. He went on a mission, so 3 years in the program, but this dude's like 23, right? I mean, big dude, understands the system. He's been in this room for years. You would expect more.
You guys kind of touched on what I was going to say is, the receiving core is by no means impressive from what we've seen so far. But I think a lot more of it is honestly systematic. I mean, you like you said, you have Evan Lake on the right side, right? Like he's one of those guys where you don't even have to be a diehard football fan, or like me, I'm editing something and I look over and you can't help but notice that Link is getting blown by. It's like, it's been that bad. It's not like, our O-line is not that great. It's like, that's a problem. I think a lot of it falls on the quarterback's shoulders too, because if you put JJ McCarthy in this offense with this cast of receivers, including Loveland, including the running backs, because that's what these receivers are working with, they'd be fine. I don't think these receivers are so abominably bad that it's sinking the whole offense. I think some of it falls on the receivers, some of it falls on the O-line, some of it falls on the scheme, and a lot of it does fall on the quarterback, because I think JJ McCarthy, for example, would plug a lot of those holes, and Orji and Warren have done none of that.
I mean, I don't know about that totally, because I just, JJ was always looking for Roman and Roman Wilson. And I mean, Tyler Morris didn't really do anything until he made that catch in the Rose Bowl. And so, I don't think any of these receivers, Samaj Morgan, had a couple of nice plays then too. But again, he was mostly seen as a bubble screen kind of jet sweep kind of guy. And he's done a lot of the same stuff here. I always had questions about whether these guys could even get downfield and there was going to be any deep threat. And sure enough, that hasn't happened, where Michigan could even try to take the top off of their defense. I mean, there's no thought there that they can do that. And we're going to see again Saturday whether they can, but I have my doubts against the Steve Belichick defense.
They haven't even taken a shot since Orji subbed in late against Arkansas State and overthrew Fred Moore by like 5 yards. But the last thought, and then we're going to move on to Washington. We're going to take a break, then move on to Washington. My final thought is just, if I had, and you can't blame, there is blame to go around. And and these are college kids. These are not professionals. This is not, I mean, I'm not saying these aren't bad people, right? But just people you needed more from, right? Just frankly, flat out. If I'm picking one guy, and maybe this speaks to how I was not expecting that much of Donovan Edwards, because a lot of people might say him. For me, it's Tyler Morris. I mean, I always had my doubts with Tyler Morris specifically. I mean, I could talk about Samaj Morgan as well, but when they were calling Tyler Morris the alpha in the room, a guy who has 13 grabs for 197 yards. He's seen the end zone one time in his career in 2 years. And by the by, his quarterback was his former high school quarterback. So he has years of chemistry with this guy. Yes, JJ left for a year at IMG, but the point remains. I always was concerned. And yes, Tyler's battled a little bit of injury here, but 6 grabs for 43 yards. And yes, he scored a touchdown this week. It was a walk-in. It was another play action by the end zone, and you catch a team off guard. It's more play design than anything. Anyone, quick thought before we move forward?
Are you guys surprised we haven't seen even more designed Alex Orji runs? Do you think that's going to be like more part of the offense going forward, or are they just scared to get him hurt?
I think it needs to be. I'll take that one first, Reiner. I think it needs to be part of the offense more. And I wouldn't even mind. I mean, because then even other little things, like you just got more people cheating with their eyes in the backfield. Even if you hit a couple, that might have been not have been good for audio, but say you hit a couple stutter steps forward and then you drop back, right? That could just get a defensive back to bite, and then you could throw it over the top. Not to mention the actual act of running it. I think he needs to run it more. I mean, if he had 7 scrambles, that means he had 2 designed runs that he kept last game. That's nowhere near enough. For me, if you're going to have an Orji in the game, I mean, run.
Yeah. Run. And in today's day and age with the RPOs and stuff, you know, you can mix in where he's kind of a threat to run, and then he dumps off a little short pass to Loveland, who's moving in the same direction as he is. You know, it's just not been a lot of that where like, oh, there's multiple optionality. It's been so one-dimensional. And when you have Mullins, you understand it, but it's not working as
there should be an RPO with a bubble screen that also has a tight end screen on the backside, right? Like he should have outs.
Well, again, Kurt mentioned that that they called some kind of, again, read options, and he's chosen to hand it off to Kalel. Now, going back to the USC game, there was a play where he actually took the ball on a read option, and he probably should have handed it off to Kalel. It would have been a long touchdown run. Who knows? He may have been burned by that in film room and scarred by that incident, and said like, oh well, now I'm just going to hand off to Kalel most chances I get, because he missed that opportunity. And so you don't know what's going in with the psychology here after seeing a play happen. I mean, again, going back to Jalen Hurts, when I covered him, they kind of hammered it home that you've got to protect the football. You can't be as reckless, because he was again early on he had much more of an interest in throwing the ball downfield and such, and then all of a sudden he became overly cautious, and so maybe that's factoring into Alex Orji's thought process as he's doing the read option.
Certainly a possibility. One thing that was not a possibility was making it out of that first segment without Alabama reference. Whew, I'm glad we got it in there. All right, very good.
I didn't say the
we all know where Jalen Hurts played. No, it's good. I mean, as much as we poke fun, that's what you're here for. You're comparing. It's an apt comparison. All right, don't go anywhere. Preview of the Washington game next. This is Hell Yes. All right, welcome back. It is a national championship rematch that Doesn't really feel like it. Coaches aren't talking like it, and the players are trying to act like it's not like it, but that's definitely what it is. Michigan will head to Seattle this weekend to take on Washington, where they last met in Houston, where the Wolverines won 34-13 in January to win the 2023 national championship. Reiner, we were both there. We will both be there again this weekend in Seattle after you make a quick pit stop in Eugene the night before. That'll be fun. We'll talk about that more later. But as far as this whole national championship rematch angle, the reason I tease with it is because, Trone was having absolutely none of it, right? I mean, these are two very different teams. Washington has replaced half its roster. Kalen DeBoer left for Alabama. In comes Jed Fish from Arizona, former Michigan passing game coordinator and quarterbacks coach. And he was just the head coach of Arizona, where they were, I would argue, perhaps the most overachieving team in America last season. And yes, Washington comes off a loss against Rutgers. Later, I will talk about why they don't have that much to be worried about there. And he's really kind of hit the ground running in Seattle. And this is a game to be scared of, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, again, because it kind of reflects the state of college football. I mean, just how much these rosters are in flux season to season, how much things can change one year to the next. And certainly that's the case with Washington. Again, you don't, Penix, you don't have Rome Odunze, you don't have, Jeremy Bernard's playing in Alabama with DeBoer. I mean, again, Parker Brailsford, the center, is with them and at Alabama. It's like, Jed Fish brought in his imports, I guess, to revamp the roster. And so, yeah, this team doesn't look very much the same. The one person that is familiar is like a guy like Giles Jackson, who played for Michigan. Then the next year came to Michigan to play them in 2021 with another totally different coaching staff. That was Jimmy Lake. And then they played for Kalen DeBoer, and now he's playing for Jed Fish. So, I mean, he's played for 4 different coaches in his playing career and 3 in the one school. So it's wild what's going on in college football. But yeah, I don't think there's much you can lead on from the championship game and January 8th to now.
Yeah. Sounds like he's on his second contract in the NFL, right? Switching all these schemes and all these things he has to do. He's a young man. He's like 21. Yeah. But just a little bit more about this new look Washington team. Yes, Michael Penix might be gone, but this offense is humming like he is still there. Will Rogers comes over from Mississippi State, and he has been very good. He's completed 74.8% of his passes for 1,354 yards. How would that sound in Ann Arbor right now? And, just a little ho-hum, 10 touchdowns, no picks. Not bad. That's because, in large part, who you just mentioned in Giles Jackson, but also Denzel Boston. He's their Rome Odunze clone. 6'4", 210 pounds, and he's already got 30 grabs, 412 yards, and 7 of the 10 touchdowns for Rodgers. So clearly a favorite target down there. And then also what you really, really got to watch out for. And I mean, Michigan has a fantastic run defense. And while Michigan has been had in the past game, I wonder if this game is kind of won and lost, one place might be to circle is how they handle the run game. Because if there's any success against Michigan in the run game, that's where Michigan's always been able to hang its hat. And you got to search Washington's Jonah Coleman, 72 carries, 521 yards, 7.2 yards per carry. I mean, that's essentially Kalel Mullings' stat line right now. And everybody would be pretty concerned if you were going up against Kalel Mullings. And little different style, but I mean, Jed Fish brought him with him from Arizona for a reason. It is weird, though, that they've only averaged 25 points per game, which is like 89th in the country. I don't get it when you look at the numbers. They haven't turned the ball over very much. I mean, only twice. If I may, I was just trying to understand how that happened. This look into this last game at Rutgers is a perfect example. Like, people see a 21-18 loss, right? They had 521 yards of offense. They missed 3 field goals, and they turned the ball over at the 37-yard line, and they had a turnover or turnover on downs at the 37-yard line, turnover on downs at the 2. I mean, they just march, and then 3 missed field goals, 2 empty possessions that deep in their territory. I mean, that could be, if those are all just field goals, that's 15 points. And I mean, that could be 21, right? And then very quickly, they were 2 for 12 on third down last week. So they were just, I mean, they were moving it on first and second down, and then they just couldn't convert on the money downs.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because again, they look like they, by most statistical measure, they're a good offense, but when it comes to scoring, which is really what counts, is they haven't done so well, which is probably why, again, they're 3-2, they have 2 losses.
How about their defense? Oh yeah, they got a good defense too, which really is why you don't want to get lost in the record here. Because I mean, we're not gonna make our pick now, but slight spoiler. Here's my one spoiler. I already did one spoiler in the first segment. This is mine for this segment. The line for this Michigan game, it opened at Michigan -1.5. It crossed all the way over the bridge and to a key number at Washington, favored by a field goal, right? And so people are, don't just think like, oh, Michigan's the national champion. It's not like people are thinking Washington's not a good team, but Washington lost even more than Michigan did. But these teams are not that far away. Just because one's 4-1 with a loss against a very good team, and Washington just lost to Rutgers, and it's like, oh, they lost to Rutgers. No. Do not let that fool you. And so back to the defense. Steve Belichick, the son of Bill Belichick, is, I believe, this is his first time coordinating a defense, right, Reiner? Or no.
Yeah, he was the unnamed defensive coordinator for the Patriots.
Right. Yeah.
They call him like defensive assistant or something like that, and he was calling the plays for their defense. So yes and no.
Yeah.
Very, very good. I know he had a heavy hand, obviously, in the Patriots defense. I didn't know if last year he was calling the shots. That's my bad. In any event, he's doing well on the West Coast. I mean, giving up 12.4 points per game, number 12 in the nation. That's pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, you would think that Steve Belichick also would be prepared to kind of play kind of a Michigan style of offense. I mean, in the sense that, those coaches, especially Belichick, always want to stop the run. So I think he's going to be, loading up to be able to do that, and he's going to have answers for it. I think his knowledge of seeing the Baltimore Ravens too in the past, and probably leaning on some tips from his father about how to defend a Baltimore Ravens scheme, are going to really come in handy versus Michigan. Because again, I mean, when you look at NFL teams, I mean, who likes to run the ball more than the Ravens? And this is, that comes from the Harbaugh, tree in that sense. I mean, the idea that what Michigan's offense is really all about is it's a Harbaugh style offense. And so I think that's going to really help Steve Belichick more than, and Jed Fish obviously is familiar again with this. I mean, having coached at Michigan under Harbaugh. So it's, none of this is foreign to them, and I think it's going to really help their defensive scheme.
Those are fantastic points, because I just think about it I tend to think about it on the other side of the ball, right? Where they're just so ready, like they've gone up against that Raven style amoeba defense, right? And Bill Belichick, I mean, they've had to attack it like Bill Belichick did with different Patriots teams, and just the things that his son would have gleaned from all the different matchups. I mean, point taken. And then what elements of it are not Raven style and maybe a little old school Michigan style and pro style passing that we've seen since early Harbaugh 2015. Well, Fish was there for that too. So you're right. So they sort of have both aspects of this pronged approach kind of perhaps handled, or at least on paper, you could see it.
I do wonder how much Bill is helping Steve. I mean, obviously he's not coaching, so
well, why wouldn't he?
And I think he's probably digging into the film himself and probably giving some tips to his son. I would think, and so I would love to know how much he's really kind of providing kind of a special advisor role to the Huskies this year.
Yeah, I'm sure if you asked Steve, you'd get probably a Bill style answer. Yeah, I mean, we're worried about Michigan. We're not really talking about that. We just got to worry about Michigan right now. Like it's not like you'd get anything from that. But I am also curious about that. Before we move on to the picks, Andrew, you're the best third voice in podcasting. What are you? Your wheels are always turning as you listen to this. What are you thinking?
I think it's all like Reiner kind of mentioned this earlier. It's kind of tough to get a read on this team. Like, are we all giving them a lot of credit because they're the defending champions. They're number 10 of the nation, and they're, coming off a good USC win, and, they beat Minnesota. They're still very much in the playoff race. Or are we looking at this Michigan team as, a team who can win with this ground and pound style and has shown something with their defense and rush game? I just think I have really no idea which way this game is going to go, because I feel like we don't know a ton about this new Washington administration, and we really don't know what this Michigan team is, even though they've had a tough test up to this point. Twice, once against Texas, once against USC. Minnesota's not terrible. I mean, we've seen them in some tough situations, but because of the way these games have gone, we still really don't even know what this team is, in my mind.
It's fair. And you would have expected you've seen the good, you've seen the bad. And
we're almost halfway through the year.
We thought we were always confused last year, right? When they weren't playing good teams, and it's like, man, what is this? What is this? Like you want to test. Now you've seen both ends of the spectrum, and it's like, once again, which way is it?
Would you be shocked if Michigan? Would you be shocked if Michigan lost like 4 more games or won all but 1 game or 2 games from the rest of the way? Like, it could go anywhere for the rest of the season. Like, they could lose to a feisty Michigan State team, Oregon, Ohio State, and Illinois is not looking easy anymore. Or they could win all those games. Indiana's not. Or they could win all those games, and I wouldn't be shocked.
Indiana's favored to win that game now.
I had to look out, yeah.
Yeah, and so
that's kind of the point. Is like it could go anywhere, right?
It could. I mean, the only game that I feel very comfortable saying they're going to win is Northwestern. And second, I would probably put Michigan State, but just stylistically. And that, I mean, you can't, and with Michigan's inability to put anyone away, you can't, it would be a disservice to just say that anything is a win. How about this game? Michigan, Washington. Do they win that? The picks on the other side of the break. Don't go anywhere. This is Hell Yes. We are back. It's time for the picks. Andrew.
If you notice us talking a little bit faster than normal, it may or may not be because the Tigers start in 13 minutes. So we'll get our show on the road here. Let's just open up with a nice little SEC game here. The slate was not a little bit of slim pickings this week, but there's still some fun games nonetheless. So Mizzou versus Texas A&M. Texas A&M is a 2.5-point favorite. Reiner, good SEC matchup here. 2 teams are still kind of learning about. Who you got in this one?
Well, I've got A&M. Oh, no, Missouri. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Missouri in this game. I mean, A&M barely beat Arkansas. They typically beat Arkansas in that Southwest Classic. But again, Arkansas has not been a great team, and they're not a great team this year. I think Missouri hasn't really played to its full potential, but I trust Eli Drinkwitz will have the team ready for this kind of game. He seems to perform in big moments, get his team ready for that. So I'm going to go with Missouri in this one.
No, Texas A&M has been much improved since they went from Connor Wegman to Marcel Reed, the freshman at quarterback. But if you just look at the competition he's played, I mean, McNeese, a bad Florida team, Bowling Green, and then Reiner's Razorbacks. It's just, I mean, it just doesn't move the needle enough for me. A&M, it just feels like they lose a lot of big games. Missouri, they bring that defense everywhere they go. And so I would love this at 3. I don't like it as much, only getting 2.5, but I think somehow, some way, the Tigers move. I mean, they kind of move really into some really good college football playoff positioning with a win.
The scariest game on Texas A&M's schedule as far as like what the heck happened there is Bowling Green. I'm looking at Bowling Green's schedule. They beat Fordham. They lost by 7 to Penn State on the road, lost by 6 to Texas A&M on the road, and then somehow lost by 3 to Old Dominion. So maybe Bowling Green's not as bad. As they clearly playing a lot of close games. Okay, so let's throw that out there. Texas A&M is looking better since the quarterback change. I'm just going to ride with the whole home team in this one because these SEC games are so up in the air, and everyone seems to beat everyone. LSU wins on a close game, then they lose on a close one. It seems like every other week. It's just like very up and down. So I'm going to ride with the home team and take Texas A&M. Moving on, like we said, kind of slim pickings this week. So we're going to go with Michigan State at Oregon. Reiner is going to be at the game, so that would be an easy pick there. The Spartans 24.5-point underdogs after last weekend also were 24.5, 24, 25, somewhere in that range, depending on where you looked, at home against Ohio State. So if you do the quote unquote book math, based on what the Vegas odds makers think, that means they think Oregon is a 6 or 5.5 or 5 point better or worse team than Ohio State. Renner, is that kind of how that checks out?
I think so. I mean, again, Oregon's had kind of a little shaky start early on. I mean, they had to really sweat it out versus Idaho and Boise State. That was their Idaho leg, I guess. First 2 games, and then they've kind of hit their stride a little bit, but still not totally there. I still though think that they'll cover against Michigan State in this game just because it's raucous home game. And Michigan State just hasn't been able to be efficient enough on offense. I wrote about this on today's website, just about the idea that, again, they've turned the ball over 13 times, which is the third most in the entire FBS. And their red zone efficiency has been terrible. I mean, it's been 66%, which is 124th in the FBS. And so I don't know if they're going to be able to produce enough points. And, Oregon is explosive enough just to kind of put this game away. And I do wonder how well MSU is going to adjust to the loud environment at Autzen. I mean, it's going to be a Friday night game. And so people are going to be really revved up, I think, there. And it might just be too much for Michigan State to overcome.
Yeah, I was going to say, how about the fact that you got 6 days to go from Ohio State to a road Oregon game? I mean, this is brutal. It's a brutal spot for the best of teams, right? Who are playing crisp. That's that's as tough a turnaround as you can get almost in America. And so, I mean, again, I think this is what we're going to see, probably the story of Michigan State's season. They looked decent in the first half, but you just can't finish it, right? You move the ball and then you get stopped on 4th and 1. You move the ball, then you fumble. You move the ball, then you throw a pick. And I mean, that's the difference between a good team and a team that has some pieces but is learning. And Oregon, whether they're rolling or not yet, they got, I mean, the home game, the short week, the more talent, all the factors. It's just, I mean, and every time you look up, someone on Michigan State's dropping, they're getting hurt. I mean, goodness. So I think Oregon covers that number.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be quick because I kind of going to sound the same as you guys here, but I think Michigan State has a carbon copy of the Ohio State game last week, basically. They'll come out, look passionate, play hard, maybe move the ball with a couple drives where the play calling looks sharp. Then they're just too careless with the football. We've seen it through, 4 different examples now. So I think we'll definitely see it again here in against Oregon, and the Ducks will cover that 24.5. Moving on, another Big Ten showdown, Iowa at Ohio State. Ohio State is a 19.5 point favorite. The Hawkeyes looking a little more feisty on offense than they maybe were last year, but still, it's Iowa's offense. You think they can compete with Ohio State, Tony?
No, I don't. It's just Ohio State and Iowa. Like, I'm gonna be wrong picking Ohio State. I'm not gonna be wrong picking Iowa. You know what I mean? That's just what this feels like. I could see. Is there a way Iowa covers this number? Sure. I mean, they got a great defense, turnovers, missed kicks, some weather. I haven't looked ahead to the weather. I mean, there's a way, but Ohio State's got dudes everywhere you look, and Cade McNamara is not great. So, I think Ohio State. Now Iowa has their running back, his name Caleb Johnson. He's number 2 in America with like 685 rushing yards. They can run the ball. But Ohio State can take away what you want to do. And so I think they do, and they force Iowa to beat them through the air, and we all know how that goes. Ohio State.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, Cade McNamara threw for 62 yards against Minnesota. I mean, Ohio State's got the number 1 scoring defense in the country. Granted, Michigan State moved the ball on them a lot in the first half, about 199 yards in their first 4 drives. But at the same token, it wasn't. They were able to generate turnovers. Why couldn't they do the same thing against Iowa except not give up the yards? And so I think that's going to be the problem. Plus, I don't think Iowa's defense is strong enough to stop Jeremiah Smith, Will Howard, Quinshon Judkins, Henderson, go down the list. I mean, it's just crazy how many.
Mecca Ibuka, Will Howard.
Yeah.
I mean, they're loaded. They're so loaded.
Will Howards. It's just like, they've cloned him now. And it's like Ohio State has everything, and they loaded up for this season too, and in the transfer portal. and they're all in on winning this. So I think, again, Iowa just does not have a chance to compete with them.
Yes, that's all I'm going to say. Let's move on because I agree with everything you guys just said. Michigan traveling to Washington has been well documented in this podcast so far. This one opened with the Wolverines being a 1.5 point favorite. It's now gone to 2.5 or 3, but we're going to go with 3 for this podcast here. So, Reiner, can Michigan get the job done on the road?
I don't know. I just am not really have shaky confidence in them after what happened in the fourth quarter. I think they also had some things exposed against them. Again, team ran tempo. Minnesota ran tempo, was able to get its offense. Why can't Washington do that maybe earlier in the game, get them on the wrong foot? The other thing is that Jed Fish is a smart offensive mind, so he's going to watch the Texas game, see how they ran them sideline to sideline, tire out that defense, get to that second unit. And then you factor in the crowd environment and the fact, this team doesn't look like it necessarily is the same vintage of the Michigan teams in the past that have done well in road situations. They're a little bit more careless with the football, not as disciplined across the board. So, yeah, I just think when you factor in all those elements, Michigan's going to have a really tough time against Washington. So I expect Washington to cover.
I'm with you, Reiner. I wrote, if Michigan keeps playing with fire, it's going to get burned. It's just they have not shown an ability to put teams away. They've not shown an ability to play from behind. The one game they were behind, yes, that was different offense, different quarterback, but they pass even less now, right? They're 18th out of 18 in the Big Ten in passing, bottom 5 in the FBS. You can't be this one-dimensional this long without eventually getting burned. I feel now could Michigan win this game? Absolutely. Just like USC, right? This could be one of those. It's why we're still on the fence, because as soon as, right when you count them out, they pull you back in. It's one of those things that there's a little bit, first road trip, nothing like that. In the foxhole, as Sharon Moore likes to say. Galvanizing us against the world. There's a unifying factor here. But I just think there's too much going against Michigan. They should have Will Johnson back. They should have Josiah Stewart back. Those are big additions to the defense. That was part of what happened against Minnesota. It should be noted. But it's just, they're going a couple thousand miles away. Washington, they probably want some revenge too. There's just, you add it to Michigan's coming off a game it maybe should have lost. Washington off a game maybe should have won. You get the point. So Washington.
Which people are involved are going to want the revenge? Is that the people in the stadium or the people in the
stadium? The vibes,
the concession people.
Nobody playing in the game. Nobody. They have to say the right things. Like, yeah, we know they beat us. We know those guys over there beat the team that wore our colors last year, and we're really heartbroken about it.
Yeah, it's as mercenary as college football gets between these two teams, as far as the rivalry between these guys, considering what happened last year. But I should probably follow you guys, as being the experts on Michigan football that you are. But when you're 9-13 or whatever I am in the picks and chasing, you got to take some chances. So I do think Michigan will get upset at some points this year, but I think Michigan actually gets the job done in this one and duct tapes it together on offense just enough to get the job done. And they have, say what you want about this Michigan team. Since they switched to Orji, they've been getting off to good starts. If they can do that, it will really go a long way in helping them in this game.
Yeah, other factor, don't forget this is a road game, and the way that the Big Ten officiating calls, they favor the home team. It seems
not in East Lansing last weekend.
Oh, that's true. That is true. But
Windsor, our columnist, literally wrote about how one of the calls completely swung the game.
Yeah. Well, I just wonder how much that is going to factor into it. Given the these crowds do have an impact on the refs, especially if they're into the game. So, and Washington's crowd is known for being into the game. So I wonder how much of that plays into how the game progresses for Michigan. Especially if they are, those kind of 50-50 calls. Judgment calls as far as holding, those kind of things end up, affecting how Michigan plays.
That's right. Crowd impacts the ref, and time is impacting this episode. It's 2:32. The Tigers' first pitch is going on right now. You'll all know what happens, but we don't right now. So we're going to go watch that as we continue our workday. So thanks to everybody who makes this possible. Our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery-Nichols. Our audio engineer, Robin Chan. For Andrew and Reiner, I'm Tony. If the Tigers win, there is playoff baseball in the Motor City next week. We'll see if that happens. Talk to you next time. This is Hell Yes.